This is the Countess costume from Phantom of the Opera. This costume is mostly seen under Christine's cape, where you barely see it, and it's kind of funny because it's such an elaborate costume, and it's actually only seen on stage for like 5-10 seconds right before the end of Act One. Right before the chandelier crash, she comes out for like a curtain call in this outfit, and then boom, the chandelier crashes. So who's looking at this outfit when there's a chandelier falling from the sky? But it is a beautiful costume. It is the only one of Christine's costumes that I have never made. I've even made the cloak that goes over this, but I have never actually made this one. And that's probably because it takes a god awful amount of materials, and there's a lot of hand detailing work, which I like, so that's not a bad thing, but it's mostly the cost. Even being economical with it, it's an expensive costume. I have been collecting materials for this for the past 10 years. Even some of my trips to New York, I had picked up some appliques, which I don't even know if I'll use. Looking in clearance sections, I found a good fabric for it years ago, which I will go over. So it's kind of been in the making and the planning for 10 years. I don't think I'll use all the materials I collected because my tastes and decisions for it have kind of changed since. And I've also, 10 years ago, there were a lot less photo references. So I didn't really, hell, I didn't even know what version I wanted to make. And I know that now. I like the Las Vegas version. I got to see the Las Vegas version in person, like up close and personal. And when you kind of do that, sometimes you see things that change your mind and you're like, oh, okay, I'd really like this to be like that. And then you don't have the materials for it. So anyway, I thought I would go through what I have on my costume Bible so far. People seem to always really like the costume Bibles and stuff. So I'll go through that and also have some photos that I've been taking. So the first photo is of the fabric itself, and this is a lot more accurate than what some of the photos are showing. I took this quite a few years ago when I first got the fabric. This was the fabric from the Glitterbug, I think, collection at Joann's. And I picked up a 3-yard piece and a 4-yard piece and thought, oh, that'll be plenty for this costume. Whereas now, a couple years later, I realize, oh, that's not enough fabric. But I was able to pick up some more. So I had another really pretty photo that's only in my costume Bible, actually, where I draped the costume. I'll see if I can find it. Where I draped the costume over my dress form and kind of made it look like the dress. And it worked really well. Here we go. Let's see if this will work. Okay. So I had kind of draped it to what it would look like. And it looked like it would be a good option for this. I couldn't find the original brocade, which would have been ideal. There's a bird chirping outside my window. That distracted me. Okay. Obviously, if I could find the original, unless it was like $50 a yard and I couldn't afford it, I am a little bit nervous about using this fabric because it's not as lightweight as I would like it to be. It is rather thick. I mean, it's a brocade. It's polyester. But let's be honest, I need a lot of it. And this, with coupons, is $15 a yard, which is about as economical as you can get. And this bird is still chirping in my ear. When I went back to revisit, should I do this costume? I thought, should I change the fabric? But I number one, I don't think I can afford it. Number two, I really fell in love with this fabric. So the other thing that scared me was there were 2 reviews on Joann's website that said this fabric does terrible in the wash. Not that I'm ever washing this. I mean, I haven't ever had to dry clean my costumes ever because they're just worn so infrequently. But apparently people have washed this fabric and the blue metallic roses have wiped off and turned to silver, which is kind of frightening. I wouldn't want to get caught in the rain or something. But again, I don't think I'm going to be washing this costume. I don't think I'm going to be in the rain. So I'm going to try to put aside my anxiety of those reviews and just use the fabric. And it's going to be thicker and it's going to be a little bit less nice than silk brocade or something that's lightweight to work with. In fact, I'm not even sure if I'm going to line the skirt. I think I will be lining at least the front panel where there are scallops. So the actual fabric goes down in scallops like this underneath the decorations. And to have a clean edge, I think I'm going to hem it that way. So yeah, I'm going to hem it that way, and I might have lining, but I feel like if I lined the whole skirt, it would be really, really heavy. Yeah, I'm still not sure about that yet. I guess I can always change my mind. One of my favorite things is scouting for materials until I spend like 3 hours trying to find something, and then it me off. So for a while, it's fun to scout materials, and when you find the perfect material, it's a great feeling. So since I can't go to stores, I've been doing that in quarantine. Much to my dismay, a lot of companies that I have normally bought from are not doing swatches right now because of COVID. So there might be the perfect fabric out there, and if it's $30 a yard, I can't take a chance on that. I need $1 swatch or a $5 swatch or whatever your swatches are. And most companies, fabric.com, a couple other companies that I can't remember the name of right now, they're not doing any swatches. So I can't get any samples in the mail for a lot of the things I've found. And I'm not rich enough to just, buy things. So I have found other sources, and I'm just going to try to find the best. And unless it's an absolute, I must have this fabric, and then I could order a yard, I guess, as a swatch, which is so expensive with shipping. But I have found things that there are certain places that have been able to get swatches, which is good. I did have some swatches already of trims and fabrics and whatnot. But let's hop into we'll hop into the undergarments of this, because that's what I started on. I used a very common pattern that a lot of costume makers use, and I looked at a couple different tutorials from other seamstresses and combined some of their techniques and ideas for altering the pattern, and then I went and bought some material. So I wanted something thinner so I could trace all the lines. I have tried to make this pattern once before and got frustrated as a beginner seamstress, especially with like transferring all those lines for all the casings of the pannier. I should say we are talking about the pannier now. One piece of the undergarments, the many undergarments. So I wanted a thin fabric that I could trace. I could put the pattern underneath, put the fabric on top, and then trace the lines easily. So I went with a really economical broadcloth with a coupon. It was $2 a yard. I used 5 yards, so that's $10. Not bad for that whole piece. But there are other things. There are other pieces too. I read that some people use the plumbing heavy-duty 36-inch zip ties for this. So I bought a pack of that for $7 because I thought, well, if it doesn't work, that's $7. If you're going to buy the half-inch steel boning, you need to invest like $50 to $70. So I thought I'd try this first. And I also had like a casing. At the store, I buy a lot of discount outlet things down in Amish country. It was this tape. I'll put a picture up of it. And this tape, like, I thought it would work good for boning channels. Turns out it didn't for 2 reasons, but we'll go into that. So I didn't need to buy that. I had the zip ties. I also had some spare boning left over in my studio. So I thought I could use some of that if I needed it. I wasn't using bias tape, so I didn't need to buy that. I stole some ribbon from my mother because they needed ribbons for certain parts of it. So I didn't have to invest a lot in this piece at first. But things went wrong, as they do. Like I said, I've never made this pattern before. I've only worked on a few 18th century type garments, really the Nancy Tremaine one only, and I made the pocket hoops, but I have not made like a full-blown elaborate 18th century gown like this before. And the pattern is kind of intermediate. I would not say this is a good beginner pattern. Might even be advanced, but it's just the instructions are written kind of weird, and that's been a common criticism I've seen among the pattern. But it is like one of the only patterns out there really that is like an intermediate level and is not like drafted from a book. Like, I don't think I'm there yet to like scale up a pattern and all that jazz and stuff. And everyone's been pretty much happy with the results, so why not? So I used the simplicity pattern. I cut out all the pieces and I didn't mark them yet. I actually marked some of them when they were closer together. There were a lot of flat felled seams, which are annoying. This is so the seam lays flat, and when you put a boning channel over it, and you're putting the boning through the casing, it doesn't stop at every seam and get stuck in there. It glides over the seam because there's no pocket to get in there. So there's a reason behind doing those seams, but there are like 30 of these seams, or I don't know, on this garment, because there's front piece, 2 side pieces, back piece, 2 other side pieces, and then there's pieces that are connected to on the top that also need the seam. Yeah, and then I made a waistband instead of doing a gathered waistband with a drawstring. I hate drawstrings.
I hate Peter Pan!
Here's a picture of the flat felled seams and what they look like. There was also some narrow hemming done, and this is kind of a picture here of what they look like sewing. So these seams are, I'm not going to go into tutorials of them because there's tutorials on flat felled seams. It's kind of like a French seam, although you're not turning things inside out. So flat felled seams, French seams, I don't know what I like more. I kind of like how these lay flat. So for this project, flat felled seams work a lot better. At this point, I had certain panels sewn together, and I decided to trace the lines there. And these lines are the markings for the bottom of the tape or the channels. Then I had all these pieces together. This is what it looked like on the form. It looks really funky because this is a very funky shaped garment. So it's I've been having to sew very slowly. So like an hour a day, maybe 2 hours on the weekend, because without being able to see any healthcare practitioners, working on my neck and my back during quarantine, sewing really, really flares up my chronic pain. So the more I sew, the worse it is. So if I just put myself through a little bit at a time, it's manageable. It'll be a little bit easier when things open back up and I can get worked on. But so I spent a lot of time. I wanted to get this looking really nice and really perfect because on my own costumes, I sometimes rush. I'm a little sloppy because back when I did commissions, I had to be so perfect, for clients. There couldn't be any mistakes. And then my garments were usually always rushed. So I thought, I'm going to take my time and make this really well. So I used this tape that I had from Amish country, and I swore that I stitched it where the boning would fit, and even with a little bit of ease. And I stitched every boning channel on. There is like 15 yards of channels in here or whatever. So I got them all pinned on and all stitched on very cleanly. Pressed everything. There weren't a lot of wrinkles or anything. It looked fabulous, and got the ribbons sewn on too. The ribbons go on the interior to help hold the shape because it's so narrow on the sides and wide in the front. There are ribbons in between there that kind of hold that together. And then I went to do the boning one day, and the boning, so that what I was using, the zip ties, they were quite thick, which is good. But when I had to double them up and tape them together for the longer hoops, they became so thick that they did not fit in my channels. And then I thought, well, I guess I had 1/4-inch steel boning lying around, but that felt super flimsy. So I looked through my supplies and I found that I had 1/2-inch steel boning. I had a 10-yard roll, which would cover most of the hooping, but that was way wider than my boning channels. And I didn't really like how the zip ties were going. They are pretty sturdy. They are sturdier than the 1/4-inch boning. So if you need something in between or you need a cheap option, they are sturdy. But I don't think 1/2-inch boning can be replaced. And most people don't use it because it's expensive, and I get that. But I had a 10-yard roll lying around, so I decided, okay, I need to redo the boning channels, and I need to make them accommodate the 1/2-inch boning. Or the zip ties. If I was going to use the zip ties, it still had to be wider. Either way, they needed to be wider. So if if this was a customer's garment, I would have had to take all the channels off, pick out all the stitching, iron it, pin the new tape on, and stitch it all again to make it look perfect. Well, this isn't a customer's garment, it's mine, so it didn't have to be perfect. And I wasn't about to waste all that time. There was one more thing with this cotton tape type thing that I was using that I thought would be so great for boning channels was actually fraying quite a bit. I don't think it was woven very tightly. So that meant that I couldn't use that anymore because I wanted this to be a lasting garment. I didn't feel like it was going to last if things were going to poke through it like that, or it was going to wear down and get threadbare and then boning would poke through. So I bit the bullet and went online and bought a 25-yard roll of 1-inch twill tape. And because I have seen multiple costumers say not to use bias tape on this because bias tape can warp. So I used the twill tape, but it was like $30-something, which I was not expecting to spend because I thought, oh, I have this. I don't need to spend this money on this. But I had to get it done. So I thought, well, at least I'm not spending money on boning, right? And I only wasted $7 on the zip ties. So I spent the 30-something, got the twill tape. So instead of taking the old tape off, all I did was stitch over it with the longer tape. And although that meant I was going to have a double row of stitching on the outside, which is kind of ugly and probably a little bit more puckering, it meant that I didn't have to spend possibly 3 to 4 hours correcting my mistake. And this is an undergarment. No one's going to see it even. So I also thought that the boning could go in between both channel layers. So you wouldn't see the boning as much from the front. So it's kind of sandwiched in between this casing now. So there was a good thing with that, but there was a bad thing with seeing more stitching on the front. So I decided to just go with that anyway. And I tried to be as clean as possible with my stitching again. I probably wasn't as into being perfect as the first time because I was tired of doing this the second time because the pinning especially takes a long time to do this and the stitching, and I kind of rushed through the stitching. But once you put the boning in and these casings, they never look perfect from the outside. So I have to let go of that. This garment can only look perfect if there's no puckering or seams showing or something. That's not how it works. So you would have to spend like triple the amount of time to get it to look that perfect. And then I cut my boning, and I knew I didn't have enough boning for the entire thing because I did do what a lot of costumers do with this pattern and did another hoop around the hem. So normally there is not a hoop around the hem, but it provides extra stability. Having another hoop there, extra support for a heavy skirt. So I did that one there. So it takes about 14 to 15 yards of tape and boning for that. So I was able to do, I believe, the bottom hoop, the hem hoop, I should say, and then the pattern's bottom hoop. The middle one, I had to use something else. And then the top hoop, I used the 1/2-inch steel, and the 2 side pieces, the 1/2-inch steel. So it was only that center hoop that I actually ended up using the zip ties for. And I decided I can always go back and add the 1/2-inch steel in there if I buy more. The problem is you have to buy it in 10-yard increments. So you can't just buy a yard or two of it. And that can get expensive to buy the 10-yard roll. So I was happy that 5 out of the 6 hoops had the steel in it. So I felt like this is going to be fine. So this is the 1-inch tape being sewn on there. And this is Bob saying hi. And that is his little hobo trunk where he looks out the window and sits on it. So I did get that boning in, and I hand stitched the channels closed for the side pieces because you have to stitch over the top boning ring. And so you have to close those channels by hand where they meet together, because if you just stitched through it, you wouldn't be able to get that. You would be closing that top channel there. But this is what it looked like when all the boning was in. And to my surprise, I actually didn't need to. I could have had this without the ribbons in there. I think the pattern is cut so well and shaped so well that it kind of held the shape on its own, but I tied the ribbons anyway, just as a extra measure. But I did the measurements that they told me. For each layer of ribbon has to be a certain spacing apart, and they're kind of almost a little bit limp in there. Like it's not really even holding it together, but I guess if you had legs under there and you stretched it out, it wouldn't go far. It would hold the shape. So I think it's just an extra layer of security there. The natural next step would be the corset. I do not have a Georgian or 18th century corset. I've never made one of that style before ever. And all I have is a Victorian corset. And I'm not the biggest fan of making corsets because they take a long time. You need a mock-up. There's lots of boning involved. There's lots of channels. The eyelets, the lacing, it's just a lot of work. But I need it for the silhouette. And it interests me that it's from a different time period and a different silhouette. So hopefully that'll keep me going. Plus, I've always wanted to use one of Red Threaded's patterns. So I am going to eventually purchase her pattern for the stay that laces up in the front, which will be really easy to get into, and also has the straps at the front. Before I go through the materials, I'll go through my reference photos here because that might help you understand. So there was actually a very beautiful set of reference photos. I think this is from New York in a costume shop of one of the Vegas gowns being made. And this was kind of a lifesaver because this is such a detailed gown and it is hard to see all of the detailing there. So it's hard to see the details. You could count, how many flowers you have, where everything is. You can see the separate layers of silver lace and black lace here. And there is a close-up photo I have that will be coming up. Actually, this one shows it well, where you can see that the lace here is a silver lace that is overlaid this like two-tone pink-purple silk. And then there are ribbons on that lace, but more on that later. So as I mentioned before, there are kind of scallops here to be shown where the different layers of trim go. So I might be lining these front pieces, but I might not line the back. And some of these, I will write notes here too when I have these photos to kind of remind myself of things that I've noticed before. So here are two really fabulous photos of this gown, and this really lets you see the detailing, the bead tassels, the detailing on the lace here. So I have various different, let me scoot this over so you can see more. I will have various different notes, like how many rosettes there are, and then it can help me get a point of what I need to buy. So if I needed decorations for these rosettes, then I know I need to get 23 of them. Those are some of the notes that I'll take, or I'll try to get designs on the lace. This is kind of the different ribbon designs that they have on there. Something that was kind of cool, when I saw the costume in Vegas, I had learned that there are actually, in this area here of this blue trim, there are magnets about right here and right here for the rooftop cape to not slip off. So it doesn't have to be tied. It just attaches with magnets. And I also have notes. Let me take this one out. I'll usually have the original drawing in there as inspiration. This was where I will start to make notes while so when I start pattern making, I can fill these in. So when I start experimenting with how much I need for each layer, I can fill that in there. I can have a total amount, and then I can purchase what I need for the lace if I ever find the perfect lace. So here are some other versions of the gown. This is an older version. These are some backstage Broadway gowns that may or may not be Vegas gowns. It's hard to tell. They kind of look like them, but I'm not sure. I also have these pictures for the wig. Here's that picture I spoke about where I was draping my own fabric and kind of had some reference images. So to me, it kind of looks a lot like the drawing, like what would be in the drawing. And then, so these, There is the costumer that runs the costume shop for the West End, which is not the version I'm doing, posts a lot of photos on her Twitter of costumes being made, to many of our costumers' delight. And this is, I actually am not the biggest fan of the UK version of the costumes. This is a beautifully done costume, but I just prefer the Vegas version for my own personal tastes. So she posted quite a lot of photos that I took and I printed out for my own reference. Here you see the Grand Panier, and they seem to have some type of ruffles on the side here, maybe to make the dress extra poofy there. I will be adding those to mine, just because it's done there, so why not? They also have this quilted cover, and I need to draft something for this. I want to get the pattern done first before I purchase the fabric, and I found my good old Sci Fabrics resource has a cheap version of a fabric like this that I can use, a quilted thing, and that is so the bones do not show through the skirt here. So I will be making a similar, like, petticoat, if you will, like that. And then these photos she posted show the different layers of the lace going on. So these are pinned on. These are not like exact, but they're pinning it on to see, you know, where the layers are going exactly and at what levels. You can see it there. And you can also kind of see how they've finished off the edges here and how they kind of almost have like a bias tape type edge on top. So I will be trying to copy that as best as I can. Thing, which is kind of insane, but will be exciting to tackle. And then what do I have after that? After that, okay, these were actually swatches for the Seraffimo costume. So, because this is like the Il Muto costume Bible. And I have notes from that costume and everything in here. But if we go back, I don't have too many notes for the Countess yet, because that usually comes during construction. I will start collecting different ideas for things. So generally in a costume Bible, you're going to already have like what you've used in the costume, okay? So it might be put together after it's done or during it. But I often, when I'm collecting things, I put them in here as options. So it might be something I intend to use and then I don't use later. But so I will have both the fabrics that I absolutely used and then just ideas of stuff. So a lot of the things on this page were things that I collected over the years. This trim right here and this beaded trim, I have a lot of this beaded trim. I don't know if I can incorporate these or not, sticking to a true replica. But if I start to make it more my own, then I might incorporate them. I might incorporate them on the lace. I'm just not sure yet. But it would be nice to use some of the original materials I collected. And then I have silver trims. So these were, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to find a lace. The lace is so wide that it is absolutely, I'm sure, fabric. So it's probably a fabric where they've cut off the edges and they're using the scallops for lace. So I've been looking for that. Here's an option from Joann's that I definitely can't afford. $50 a yard. It's very heavily beaded. It's their only silver lace beaded option. But it's not my favorite. It's kind of heavy looking. I don't like the design in the middle. This is how it's printed out. So it's not, I couldn't have the same design. You would cut off both edges to use for the lace. They look like they're about anywhere from like 12 to 16 inches wide lace. But not only can I probably not afford this option, because even with the coupon, that's $25 a yard. But it seems, at least up here, it seems very heavy to me. So I played around with the idea of possibly buying silver tulle and maybe edging it in something like this, making my own piece of lace. And I also had, if I was going to add to the lace, I had different options here that might work. I really like this rhinestone diamond trim. That's really beautiful. And I'm wondering if I could possibly use that instead of the rope or in addition to the woven rope that they have on the costume, because I'm not a big fan of the gold that they put in that rope. I think I like the costume to stay in the cool family and the silvers and the black and the purple and the blue. I don't want to use that silver cord. Let's see if I can find a close-up. So there's kind of a close-up here. It's like a gray, dark gray, and gold and pearl all wound together. But that's not my favorite on the costume. And when I'm making my own costume, I get to make those decisions, and I can use that. So I also absolutely love this trim right here. I would like to incorporate it somewhere. Whether I use, so in this costume, the layers of trim used here, the silver trim is also used on all these layers here. But if that becomes too expensive, I could potentially use something like this or like this. So we'll see what happens there. This was also the only other option from Joann's that I could actually see and feel in person, and I don't like it. The pink might go with this costume, and the black and the silver are definitely in a theme of this costume, but I don't have a good feeling about that one. It's definitely cheaper, $30 a yard, or $15 with a coupon. So I ordered 4 swatches from this place called Big Z Fabrics, and they sent me 1 and a note that they can't do any more swatches while California's on lockdown, so they'll refund my other 3. And they haven't refunded my other 3. So, but this is probably my favorite out of all 3. It's metallic without being obnoxiously metallic like this one. Sometimes when you get too obnoxiously metallic, it actually goes and looks cheaper than you intended. So this has a metallic sheen to it. And I don't have a picture of the entire fabric. This is actually a picture of the center of the fabric rather than the scallop on the end. But I have a very good feeling about that one. And that is $20 a yard, so it's still very steep. But you're getting 2 yards out of every yard of fabric because you're using both edges of the fabric. And then I did get, for the black and silver lace, that was very, very difficult to find options. So I have an option here that's metallic, but it seems much more black to me than I want. And I found another option in England, and I think I only need about 2 or 3 yards of the black and silver fabric because it's used on the engagements right there, and then it's used on all these scallops here and stuff. But I could just cut strips and like embroider the edges and make my own lace out of fabric because I have not found any kind of silver trimmed thing anything that works for that. And then these swatches here are very old. I probably wouldn't be able to find any of these fabrics before, so that I just kept them in there because it was just part of it. But I had an idea. I'm looking for ways to reduce the work on the lace, so the ribbon areas, the colored ribbons that are on top of the silver lace. And I'm playing around with the idea of this type of rosebud fabric on mesh, that I could possibly dye those the colors I need and then add the stems of the flowers. I'm not sure yet. I don't know if it'll look right. It's just something I'm thinking of, to not have to fully embroider all those flowers. These are the materials that I have for the Grand Panier. And this is the main fabric, the broadcloth. And that panier that I showed is actually not done yet. I'm going to add a ruffle to the bottom because it just looks pretty. I do need to get 2 more yards of this fabric. I found this economical 25-yard roll of this lace, and I just thought it would look really pretty that way. But I have some of the materials. I have horsehair braid in stock, so those ruffles that were on the UK panier right there, I figured I could use some of that on there. And then, like I said, Psy Fabrics, I already have a swatch of this quilted type fabric that I can use, so I will be using that. This isn't complete yet, but I also usually keep my budget sheets in here and a costume Bible, and I correct that as I go along, but sometimes when I'm planning a costume, I'll put a temporary one in there of the things that I've already purchased. So that is the costume Bible so far. There are quite a lot of other materials that I need, And I still have swatches that are coming in the mail for various things. So one of the things that I thought would be easy to find online, but wasn't necessarily easy, was the silk that goes underneath the silver lace. So to me, looking at those photos, it looks like a pink shot blue or pink shot purple silk. That is where the silk is woven one way this way, one color this way, and one color this way. And then as it moves and you see it from different angles, it looks like different colors. So that's how that effect is done. And I could just use a simple purple underneath. I have some swatches for purples, but these are way too dark in my opinion. And I feel like I don't need too much yardage of that special purple fabric. Possibly 2 yards if it's a very wide fabric. So I am looking at one online. I looked at a couple. They just didn't seem like the right color, or about 10 of the sources I used aren't doing swatches, and that's not something I can just buy a $20, $30 a yard fabric like that. I have to have a swatch. So I found another company in England on eBay, and they are sending me a swatch of theirs, and this is what it looks like. And I think this could work really well, and it's actually economical too. So this would be the ideal solution if it's good enough. The only other thing I have is I was playing around with the idea of possibly using these beaded trims where you can just cut as the beaded tassels that go underneath all of the rosettes. I could bead them all myself, and actually I would use much nicer beads than these plastic beads, but it's going to depend on where I'm at with budget and time and what I'm willing to do. So I might use, I thought the pink ones might actually be very beautiful with the fabrics, and so I'll have to test some things out, but maybe some colored pearls would be interesting. But these ones you literally just cut and then they're already stranded like that, and then I would never have to worry about the beads breaking off either. Because if you strand the beads yourself, you're going to have to use bead locks and bead lock crimp covers, and it's to put dangling beading on a costume, you have to have some safety measures. So if something falls off, your entire strand of beads does not fall off. So that might be an option I'm looking at. I also might look at some gems or something to go in the middle of the rosettes. I'm not sure what I'm going to do there yet, whether I'm going to completely copy what they have in the original costume or do something on my own. So far, that is where I'm at with the costume. Very much in the planning stages. Coming back to the beginning of the video where I was talking about my purple fabric as well, I just thought of this. So I had mentioned that I had bought 3 yards and 4 yards because Joann's never has like a consistent amount on a bolt, and I end up, when I really like a fabric, I end up having to go to like all the Joann's and pick pieces up and everything because I want to use coupons and I don't want to pay for shipping online. It's a way to keep your costs down. So I bought this years ago, and when I was looking at similar patterns for 18th century gowns that fit over grand panniers, I thought, oh no, I need more fabric. I need like 7 yards in the skirt alone, if not more. So I had a mini freak out, but then remembered that I had seen Joann still had some of that fabric in one location. It was not available to be shipped online. It was not available to be picked up, and it was not in any close by store. It was in a store that's kind of like an hour away from me, and I couldn't find it anywhere else in Ohio. So there was no option of getting it shipped or anything like that from any other store. Small rant. I really wish that Joann's could ship from stores. So like if there was some store in Pennsylvania that had this fabric, if I could pay them to ship it to me, that would be wonderful. I've been putting that on the response customer survey comment cards for years and years and years, and they still haven't done it. So maybe one day they will. But for now, I had to drive an hour to go get the fabric. I found 4 more yards of it in 2-yard increments. So I have a total of, let's see if I can add correctly. I have a total of 11 yards, a 2-yard piece, a 2-yard piece, a 3-yard piece, and a 4-yard piece. And we're somehow going to make this work and Frankenstein it together. And I think that will be plenty. I'm not going to have as full of a skirt as I've seen some patterns that have like 10 yards of fabric in a skirt. And I'm going to get it down and not use that much. So might need some pattern wizardry going on there, but I'll get it done. Yeah, so that's where I'm at right now. I will try to keep taking pictures and videos and blog again on part 2, part 3, see however long this takes, if I ever finish it, who knows. I'm much more likely to make more videos if you give the video a like, possibly a comment, because if I don't see any reactions, then it makes me think people don't want to see more. So if you want to see more, give me your vote by, liking the video. That lets me know, hey, I like to see this, I want to see more, and I will put my time into making them. So thank you for watching, and I hope it's interesting. And if you want me to make more, let me know.